The city on the hill, manifest destiny, the frontier. These phrases were used for 200 years to celebrate the westward expansion of the United States. Borders were crossed, peoples were removed, and the phrases resounded with messages of inevitability, righteousness, and heroism. By the end of the 19th century, the continent had been conquered. Americans began looking for new borders to cross. European powers had claimed colonies for centuries. Now the U.S. embarked on a new era of expansion beyond its shores. Imperialism was added to the list of phrases. This is a story about how the United States expanded at the turn of the century, how it conquered distant lands, and at the same time conquered doubts at home. It is a story about wars, world's fairs, and the creation of an empire. The story begins in Cuba. On February 24, 1895, Cubans take up arms to win independence from 400 years of Spanish rule.
Separation from Spain is the only cure for Cuba's ills.
A year later, and thousands of miles away, Filipinos rise up against 300 years of Spanish colonialism.
We sons of the people seek to redeem the mother country from the slavery of Spanish rule.
Spain now fights a war on two fronts. Cuban and Filipino insurgents are inspired by the Declaration of Independence and America's own history of revolution. But for 3 years, the U.S. government does virtually nothing, refusing to recognize or support these struggles for independence. Then, on February 15, 1898, the cause of the explosion of the U.S. battleship Maine in Havana Harbor is a mystery. But newspapers, songs, plays, and films think they know who's responsible. 2 months later, President McKinley calls for U.S. intervention in Cuba. But the first battle of the war occurs far from Cuba. 5 days after McKinley's declaration of war, Admiral George Dewey defeats the Spanish fleet at Manila Bay in the Philippines. Dewey's victory, Teddy Roosevelt and his Rough Riders, the Battle of San Juan Hill, the Battle of Santiago. These events come to represent a new status for the United States. America declares itself to be a global power. Independence fighters in the Philippines rejoice at the defeat of Spain. They assume the U.S. will be an ally in establishing a free and independent nation.
I hereby decree the object of the revolutionary government is to prepare the Philippines for the establishment of a true republic and to fight until all free nations shall recognize it.
But the United States does not recognize Philippine independence. America has other ideas. Europe had been claiming overseas colonies for over 400 years. In the 1890s, the last great land grab is on. The United States wants a piece of the action and needs to quell social conflict created by industrialization. The U.S. sets its sights on global economic expansion, especially access to China. On the home front, the United States sponsors 4 enormous international expositions. Emulating its European rivals, the American expositions construct a new image of the nation, suitable to the role of empire.
The great nations of the world, the United States is the youngest. Our resources are equal to those of any other nation. Our people are among the most intelligent, cultured, happy, and prosperous of mankind. The world's Columbian Exposition is the natural outgrowth of this nation's place in history.
These massive world's fairs promote industrialization and international trade. They also glorify Western culture and America's rise to world prominence.
Son, this is quite an education. It's like walking through all of the world's civilizations. I wish you could see it.
These buildings will disappear. This creation of art, beauty, and industry will perish. But who can tell the new thoughts that have been awakened, ambitions fired? In the furtherance of national interests, this fair is performing an important part.
Emma, you wouldn't believe the things they got here. It's a different world. At night, the buildings light up as bright as day.
To the Philippine people, as soon as the inhabitants of each town are free from Spanish dominion, the people shall assemble in open public meeting and proceed to elect by a majority of votes a chief of the town and 3 official delegates.
Filipino nationalists secure independence from Spain and set about establishing a new nation. No easy task given its geography and diversity. 7,100 separate islands and over 80 ethno-linguistic groups.
The chiefs of each town, after consulting the opinion of their assemblies, will themselves assemble and elect by majority of votes the chief of the province.
In the United States, Filipinos are presented only as children or savages.
To the Honorable Secretary of State John Hay, Washington, D.C., January 24th, 1899. There are approximately 20,000 American troops in the city of Manila. A number of war vessels are stationed in the harbor. A few days ago, a transport sailed from New York City with 2,000 troops. We are further informed that troops are under orders to proceed by way of San Francisco to the Philippines. It is naturally the impression of my government that these warlike preparations indicate immediate military operations aimed at the existing government of the Philippines. The Philippines are in a state of public order. They possess a government satisfactory to their inhabitants. It is my duty to request assurances that it is not the intention of America to make war upon the new Republic of Asia, and that our liberties are not in danger at the hands of a republic whose name we have always associated with freedom. Very respectfully, Felipe Agoncillo, Envoy of the Philippine Republic.
President McKinley refuses to recognize Felipe Agoncillo or the new government of the Philippines.
I did not know what to do with the Philippines. I walked the floor of the White House night after night. I went down on my knees and prayed Almighty God for light and guidance. And one night it came to me. To give them back to Spain would be cowardly. To transfer them to France or Germany would be bad business. The Filipinos were unfit for self-government. There was nothing left for us to do but to take them, to educate the Filipinos, uplift and Christianize them.
The peace treaty with Spain faces strong opposition in the U.S. Senate. Then, on February 4th, 1899, tensions over annexation of the Philippines erupt in Manila. 2 days later, the Senate ratifies the treaty by one vote. Annexation and war against the Philippines occur almost simultaneously.
I have tried to avoid armed conflict in my endeavors to assure our independence, but my efforts have been useless against the American government. The people are strong when they wish to be so. Without arms, we have driven the Spanish from our shores, and without arms, we can repulse this foreign invasion.
Mine eyes have seen the orgy of the launching of the sword. He is searching out the hoardings where the stranger's wealth is stored. He hath loosed his fateful lightnings, and with woe and death has scored. His lust is marching on.
America's military action provokes immediate and sharp debate across the nation.
We protest, forcing our system of government upon an unwilling people. We protest the maintenance of a large standing army. We urge working men to awake and call upon their representatives to save them from the dangers of imperialism.
The colored people of Boston into their solemn protest against the unjustified invasion by American soldiers in the Philippine Islands. While rights of colored citizens in the South are shamefully disregarded and lynchings frequent, it is the duty of the President to reform these domestic wrongs and not to attempt to civilize alien peoples by powder and shot.
The policy of expansion is America's historic policy. We have annexed the Philippines exactly as we have annexed Hawaii, New Mexico, and Alaska. We cannot go back. First, for the sake of the islands themselves, and next, for the sake of our honor.
Just beyond the Philippines are China's illimitable markets. We will not retreat from either. Our largest trade henceforth must be with Asia. This question of acquiring the Philippines is deeper than any question of party politics. It is elemental. It is racial. God has not been preparing the English-speaking peoples for 1,000 years for nothing but idle self-contemplation. He has made us adept in government so that we may administer government among savage and senile peoples.
A republic cannot be an empire, for a republic rests upon the theory that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed, and colonialism violates this theory. We do not want the Filipinos for citizens. They cannot share in the government of our nation, and moreover, we cannot afford to add another race question to the race questions we already have.
I have been overflowing with wrath ever since the proposal was made to engraft our half-barbaric form of government on our new possessions. I have been studying how to save, not them, but ourselves from the disgrace. This is the first time the United States has ever tried to foist upon a people the exclusively masculine form of government.
In a sordid slime harmonious, greed was born in yonder ditch, with a longing in his bosom, and for others' goods an itch. As Christ died to make men holy, let men die to make us rich. Our God is marching on.